It is the second of the mythical sea beast motif Leviathan in the series. It is LWT01 Misrach Levia, coming with a kit of Perfect Guard, double Hyper Freeze, Sea Legs, and the leg ability of Elusive, which will grant a damage reduction if the user's evade is higher than the incoming attackers. Now, with yet another model introduced and designed by Tagro themselves, this is already going to be a very wonderful model across the board for what it covers, as well as introducing a much stronger variant of an already existing ailment, which is definitely going to shake up a lot of the meta, especially in a game where, with Buff Trap that was introduced with Urzatine, will make using Stat Cleanse to keep ailments off your back much more difficult across the board. Perfect Guard is a defense-based skill that, while active, will allow Misrach Levia to intercept all incoming blows and nullify them at 0 damage for 2 charges. Of course, the only weaknesses to this are anyone that is using Destroy, Defense Seal, or Deathlock, or even anyone using Slit. In all other cases, though, 0 damage across the board. Hyper Freeze is a brand new skill and essentially just a stronger variant of an existing ailment Freeze, but simply explained, it has a much higher base damage than regular Freeze, but also is packing Pierce damage, which means that if it breaks apart, it will have a likelihood of extending carryover damage to another part, and even carry on the likelihood of Freeze on top of that. So right from start, this Misrach Levia is going to be very strong on the field when it comes to the ailment game, especially since Freeze guarantees that while the opponent is stopped cold, all attacks are guaranteed to land, and all attacks are further guaranteed to be critical hits on top of that. Sea Legs also grant this upgraded Leviathan type a much higher, relatively solid coverage across most terrains, but of course with a very high emphasis on a naturally high evade stat. And that being said, with an evade of 2065, that definitely speaks for itself at the case. A mobility of 836 though is very, very good though, especially for Sea Legs, which usually don't specialize in having high mobility, and instead focus on high evade. However, with a melee resistance 574, that's not super great. It's definitely not as bad as it could be, as say some bots that are in the even 300 or 400s. But 574 really isn't all that great either, which means you'll be taking a lot of punish damage from incoming melee strikes. But with a shoot resist of 1197, almost 1200, he does kind of comp for that moderately well, as someone that can kind of keep himself on the field from and keep damage low from long range. Across the board, however, Misrach Levia is honestly pretty solid in terms of all of the departments, aside from the very low melee resist. Head armor of almost a little over 4,400 there, arms at about 3,500 each, and legs at about 4,250. Very solid HP pool across the board too, which means that he's definitely going to be able to take a hit moderately well. Base damage is also very nice between both his parts too, at about just shy of about 1,000 on his right arm, and close to 1,700 on the left. Include pierce damage on that one, it's going to be a very nasty hit on top of that. As a pure set score, I do honestly have to rate this model a pretty solid 7.5 across the board. Even if in the current meta where ailments are constantly being negated by someone with Stat Cleanse, being able to use, say, Buff Trap or Effect Clear will make something like Hyper Freeze very, very much so effective, especially even if the ailment itself is negated. The pierce damage is still something that you can rely on as even just a fallback at the very least until, say, the Stat Cleanse wears off or is removed. And of course, Perfect Guard does also mean that this model is capable of being able to tank hits moderately well, as long as, like I mentioned, they are not Destroy or Slip. As mixed parts, on the other hand, I do have to rate it much higher at about an 8 out of 10, given that Perfect Guard kind of speaks for itself over how useful it is, but it's also worth noting that even if Misrach Levia has a heavy limit of 2, none of their parts are considered heavy, which grants it very solid flexibility in using the parts anywhere. The head for Perfect Guard, either arm for Hyper Freeze for that stronger likelihood of the ailment, or even just the Sea Legs to have a set raise, which is generally a smart idea to have 1 or 2 of each leg type fully capped just in the case you'll need them.